Outer Orange.
Oh my god, it's time to talk about the strong deck. Let's do it. Privyet. Welcome to another video. We're going to discuss Prism today because this is a very impactful deck and I kind of want to give you guys quite a bit of a rundown. This is a deck that I've actually spent a lot of time on in the last, I want to say 2-3 days. I definitely didn't test this deck when it first dropped in terms of like the release of the actual cards and what they do back in JP's meta. I knew enough about the deck to know that it was going to be strong. It was probably going to be a deck that I was going to be focusing on once the actual set drops. I've obviously been in Japan for the last couple like week or so. I've also had someone stay at my house to kind of help out while we traveled to Japan, all that stuff. So basically I've been kind of MIA, so I haven't had the time to truly test this deck. So I've actually been playing some of my pet decks like Medell and Fertia because upgrading those decks took very little time and effort, and I had to wait in the mail for some of the cards for this deck anyway. So today I'm going to break down the current deck. I will probably make another video in the future once we have the triple booster set come out, because this deck does change once we get the triple booster, once Sharinui comes out and once Energy Blast comes out. But for the time being, a couple months, you can definitely play it how it currently is, and I'll kind of talk to you guys about some options. We're gonna go get started. Before that, I want to talk to you guys about sleeves and my boxes. So right now I'm using these really cool I think they're VTuber sleeves, if I want to say correctly. I got these in Japan actually, and I thought they were super cool. They have a really nice shine to them. I really like them. And then I also just have like a random border, and actually I switched. This was my someone sent me a Medell. The Medell had this really cool like outer border thing, and I've just been kind of using it on the main grade 3 that I'm usually on. I was using it on Medell, but now I just had to switch over to this because this has been the main deck I've been playing. For the regular sleeves, we're actually using Pacifica sleeves, which are also from the Japan soils. I got these over in Japan, and I put them on instantly because I just really love Pacifica. Deck box is pretty simple. It's just an Ella Steel deck box. I'm probably going to eventually transition this over to a Dank Ritual box where I'll have 2 decks in there. My 2 main D decks I'll probably be playing. Probably going to put in there as my testing decks as I move into the BSF season, which was happening very soon. The first event is starting out soon. That's the reason I wanted to make this video, for you guys to know what you're dealing with when it comes to Prism. Now, there's a couple variations for the ride line that you can do, so that's why I'm covering it out. But we're gonna talk about the ride line, we'll go into basically the regular stuff. So we're gonna start with the 0. For this deck particular that I'm running, you can make the 0 whatever you want. The one that I'm playing is the Prism grade 1 that works with, that's not Prism grade 1, but it's the Prism ride line support for the grade 1. I just want to let you guys know right now, some people do run the Ballista engine just for the draw and not for the random soul charge. I prefer this engine. The soul and the other stuff is really good, don't get me wrong. It also is really good for the grade 2 gaming. However, this search is pretty important. I've noticed this deck really struggles if you don't at least find 1 to 2 Prism units. If you kind of get stuck where you only have 1 for the majority of the game, you're in a really bad position. So you really want to find the one. This one lets you top 7 and look for a Prism card, and then the second ability, the second part of it, if you whiff, you can call her out and still charge 1, so you basically get an extra soul. Not the worst. Definitely the top 7 is very important. Next we have the 2. So basically this skill happens when you ride this on top, and then this skill activates when you ride this on top. Then her skill just says if you call Prism unit, and if you do draw a card, you don't want to miss that skill as well. That draw is pretty massive. I just think the draw in general is really good. You also bounce with her anyway, so whatever you call to the board, you'll be probably bouncing it back in general. So leading in, let's go into the Labrador herself. Promise Labrador. She has a first skill. You can Soul Blast, choose a rear guard, bounce it back to hand, and then she gets 5k power for that. So that's really important. The 5k makes her an 18k beater basically all the time. You always want to use that effect. Never want to miss it, and if you do happen to miss it, find a way to get your soul back and unmiss it, because you definitely really want to use that first effect. Second effect says when she attacks, by the way, I actually thought this card was less broken. I found out there's a draw in here, which I thought was insane. Basically, when she attacks, you can Cowboss 1, choose up to 2 units with Prism in their card name and call them from hand to open rearguard circles. And if you called a card, you get to draw a card. If your opponent's grade 3 or greater, she gets a crit, and all your units get 5k power. This is actually insane. The draw is massive, the call is massive because you can call 2. The crit is massive. Everything about this card is like actually really good. And of course, with the engine that she works with, this is insane. You have to call Prism cards, keep in mind. So, you know, just something to kind of keep in the back of your head. If you don't have Prism cards in hand, you can't do stuff. So you should be always prioritizing keeping your Prism cards in your hand at all times. So there's something to kind of keep a caution off as you're playing the deck. That's basically the deck. It's very simple. You attack with your rear guards, you bounce it back, you attack with her. Call the same rear guards back out, swing with those, and then you bounce them back to your hand again. And that's basically what you want to keep doing over and over again. This deck is actually pretty simple in the grand scheme of things, and then it gets a little bit harder when you have to make certain decisions, and especially when you're bricking. When you're bricking, that's when the decisions really matter. Let's go ahead and talk about the rest of the deck, and we'll kind of get into some decision making and some other stuff later. I always want Persona. So, you know, just Persona. This Persona is really important. Also, Prism is searchable. She's a searchable card off of all the things that search. So you definitely want to find this card. Also, if you're super bricking, you can actually call her out and then use the grade 2 that I'll be showing later and bounce her back to hand anyway. So there's no reason not to run her and all that kind of good stuff. For the time being, we are running this Regalious piece. You can also run the Chalice if you just can't afford this one. You can run the Chalice in the spot. That's perfectly fine. That's the Persona one. I will say this one's better. However, since we'll be switching over to the new Regalious piece anyway, if you feel like you don't want to drop the 25 on this, that's perfectly fine. You're going to have to drop even more probably on the other one because the other one's probably going to go up in price like crazy. If you don't know which one I'm talking about the new one that basically gives resist to your board and your opponent can't touch your board that often. It just kind of helps with especially Chernuian and a couple other matchups. It just keeps your board secure. I will say this deck in particular does not really care too much about the Regalious piece. I feel like the deck plays, it has an empty board a lot of the times, or there'll be like 1 unit or something. But it is nice to know that your stuff isn't going to get dominated regardless, so you definitely want to probably play the other one. But for safety reasons and everything, you can run this one or the Chalice and be perfectly okay. A super eccentric shot. This is really good. It gives 5k to all your rear guards. It gets the red text on them to counter blast forward. It's really good card. I was talking about this card in my what to buy. This card's really solid. You can run this in like other decks too. It's just the fact that you just get like a passive like 5k to everything is just really nuts, especially in decks that bounce a lot, recall themselves, get Persona on top of that. They have the cycler card that also comes into play. You can make some really insane numbers. Going to the 2s, it's probably the hardest part of the deck in terms of if you want to build it is getting access to these. I played Ballista and I basically have had these since Ballista has dropped, and basically Prism is just better Ballista in my eyes. So this is the Valspon. Basically, if you discard her during ride phase, you can Soul Blast, Bomb Deck her, and draw a card. Very massive. If you open these, you're in a really good spot. You do have to be cautious of the Soul. Prism Soul is actually, you have to be very careful. You can play around the Soul because there's cards that Soul charge, but still, like, you don't want to go super crazy in the Soul to where you completely run out and you are forced to do certain things to get the Soul back. You want to kind of like even you keep your Soul pretty even. Like, you always want to stay at basically 1 to 0, but don't overdo it basically. But the other effect of this card is you can counterblast on place if your Persona Road and all your front row units get plus 5k. Also very important, you can also spam her with the Labrador effect. You can use her twice. Keep in mind, in every card I'm going to showcase, you can basically, if they have on place abilities, you can spam them twice. Which is very important because some decks some cards you want to be able to spam with, and this is definitely one of them. Of course, it's 2 counterblasts, so very cautious, and this is just kind of better in a way. So, you know, you may want to just do this over this, but keep in mind this is in order, so you can do this and then do this, and then you have the 10k buff basically. So just something to kind of keep in mind. But that's the cycler card. Next we have a Prism card. This is the Prism that's very important. Obviously all the Prisms are important, but this one's important because it bounces cards back. So Herber's effect says if it's placed from hand or on guard circle, she gets 5k power, 5k shield, as long as you're on Labrador. So as long as you're Labrador, her effects are online. Her second ability, also if you have Labrador Vanguard's card name, at the end of the battle she attacked, you can Soul Blast, bounce her back, and then bounce another Prism back. So this is what I was talking about. You can bounce her back and bounce Persona back. In case you don't have the grade 1, you can still play into a 5 attack play with this. You can also play with the grade 1. Basically the grade 1 is a Prism card, and you can have her in a column with her if you're playing early on and just bounce her back. By early on I mean before Persona turns. Bounce her back and bounce the grade 1 back and do some cool shenanigans that way. Or you can put her in the front row, then put the grade 1 in the front row, attack with the grade 1, attack with her, and then bounce both cards back to hand and empty out your front row. Also really good. Another reason why you don't need Yuika in this deck, I don't remember if people were talking about Yuika. I might have even brought up Yuika. I just don't remember. This deck does not need Yuika at all, which is the bright side. Sadly, you do need this, but you do not need Yuika, so this is definitely a Yuika-less deck. Also, Yuika, the Soul Blast is extremely heavy. You do not want to use that, so definitely prioritize that. And this card's really cracked. You definitely want to find at least 1 copy of this and 1 copy of the grade 1 ASAP. Another thing to keep in mind, this is a 10k shield basically at all times, with the exception of early on. Early on, this is not 10k shield. Like, you can't guard with this and expect to have the 10k. You don't want to guard with this anyway because you really want to keep this in your hand. So you shouldn't be guarding with this regardless. But anyway, if you were to, just keep in mind the 10k shield is offline until you're on grade 3. So that is that. Next, we have probably the most insane card in this deck, in my opinion. The fact that this isn't a Prism card, but it does Prism card stuff is nuts to me. Basically, on points. On rear guard circle, you can Hair Blast top 7 for a Prism card. Grab it, cool. You get it to hand, awesome. So this is a Prism Searcher, which is very important. You really need this for a second. And then also if you whiff, which is also important, if you whiff, you can Soul Charge 2. You can force the whiff, you can just not pick anything and a Soul Charge 2. So again, talking about the whole Soul situation, if you're running out of Soul, you can make the decision to purposely whiff, and then even if there are cards there, and then Soul Charge 2, which will help you with the Soul Blasting that you may have to do, or if you're trying to set up for specific bouncing turns. Like I said, this deck eats Soul a lot, so surprisingly enough, like it does come up. I had literally a game where I purposely whiffed this, and then I was like, okay, I whiffed it, I got the 2 Soul, now I can play the game again. And that's very important. Like I said, this card's really nuts. This card basically carries your whole deck. You can have a really crappy mulligan, but if you have this card in your mulligan, chances are you'll be okay. And then obviously after you find one, the rest of them become shield. Like say you find one and you just keep spamming the one and bouncing it back, these just become just generic, like just shield basically. You're just gonna basically guard with these. She does have a second ability, which is also nuts. She says at the end of battle, she attacked. If you have a Vanguard with Labrador in this card name, you may return this to hand. That's really massive because it empties out the board, which then you can bring the board back with these cards and bounce it back. Really, really nutty ability. Surprisingly enough, if people try to damage deny you, you can just, if people try to damage deny your counterblast off the Labrador, you can actually just call 2 of these out, swing with both of them, bounce them back to hand, and do it again, which is also really nuts. The fact that you can attack with these and bring back to hand on grade 3 turns is absolutely cracked to me. I think that's nuts. You can definitely play around with this a little bit more. Like say you don't want to commit the Prism, say you can't commit the Prism, say you're bricking, whatever it is, you can just call these out and play around that way. And the fact that you can do that is actually, in my eyes, just insane. Like I said, she bounces back as long as you have a Labrador Vanguard. Which, by the way, just a little side note, is a really interesting concept in Premium as well, because you can bounce these back in Premium if you have Labrador Vanguard. So that's also just really cool. Let's go into the ones. We have the Lighty. This is the other Prism card that I've been talking about, but just haven't been saying her name. She has the same first effect. If your Vanguard is Labrador, she's 5k power, 5k shield. So basically, if you call out any point, she's always at 13k. Just second ability, if she's returned to hand from your guard circle, if you have Vanguard Labrador's card name, you can soul charge, and then it's a May, by the way. And then if you do not counter charge, you can counter charge. The counter charge is very massive. You'll definitely be setting up for this at all times, almost, because the counter charge is super, super important. You want to be counter charging every single turn that you counter blast on Labrador. Want to make sure you get that counter charge out because you do spam counter blast quite a bit. Like I said, we have this counter blasting, we have the Belch Point counter blasting. Ideally, you want to swing with her, swing with the 2, and then use the 2's ability to bounce both of them back. That is the ideal situation that you want to constantly always try to play for. So you always want to be able to bounce this back. Even just for the soul charge, it's a May, but that soul charge will come up. You definitely want to use it. You want to use this as often as possible to avoid having to use this soul charge as much as possible. That's basically that. Next, we have the kind of like a little bit of a flex slot here. Aura. This could be anything you want it to be right now. At the moment, this isn't like mandatory, but it's nice to have. If you can't afford these can also be the 15k. There's a 15k common that says if you bounce something in the main phase, she stays on the board. If you didn't, she self-retires. Basically, just bounce with Labrador and then call her out, and then she'll be a 15k beater. Very nice 15k beater. It's like just a substitute for now. You can also run Reese's in the same slot if you really want. And you can also just run this and just stick with this if you can afford it, because this is a very expensive card right now. So if you can't afford it, those are the 2 things you can put in on the side. You can also optimize, just put like this to 4 and then put this grade 1 to 4 in her slot as well, because remember I'm running both of those at 3. You can basically optimize the deck's functionality in terms of seeing certain things, and you can just basically just remove these completely and do what I did. I actually recently made a video where I did exactly that. I didn't have the Aura at all, and I just had this at 4 and the Order at 4, and you know, the function's perfectly fine with that. Aura is just really good for just in case scenarios, especially with the Regalia's piece coming out and finding Sanctitude. Sanctitude is probably the biggest thing with this deck. Their Stride decks are coming out soon. And the Stride decks, you really want to see a Sanctitude into those because those triple drives get kind of insane. The one has a guard restrict they have to worry about, and the only out to that is definitely the Sanct. So you do want to find Sanctitude, at least that. The Regalia's piece may not be as important, but the Sanctitude is. And also, it just farms shield out of your opponent's hand, which is good because you want them to be as shieldless as possible once you get to grade 3. So definitely a good card. Also, if you want a grade 2 game, these are really good cards to grade 2 game with. There are better cards to grade 2 game with in terms of like raw shield, raw power, but these are really good that forces your opponent to have to block. The only downside of these cards is that they're 6Ks, but they have a really strong ability, so that's why they're 6Ks. Next, we have the card that I just showed. This is the Nebirona, or Nebirona. Nebirona is insane. Nebirona makes crazy numbers. If you keep calling Prism cards in front of these cards, they're just nuts. You can also put it behind Vanguard, and when you place your Vanguard, you get the ability, but that, honestly, that shouldn't be happening too often. Anyway, long story short, ability says when a Prism unit is placed in front of her, that unit gets 5k power, which is really strong because they already get 5k power on their own, and then they get another 5k off of this, which means they're getting 10k power, which is massive. It makes magic numbers every single time. This is always 18 basically, which is really good. Definitely something you want to keep track of. So yeah, this card's really solid. This makes the numbers just perfect to where it's always annoying for your opponent to guard. It always makes those weird 30 28k intervals where it's just awkward enough to guard, or if they're running the mouse, you can go even into 33k intervals, make it even more awkward to guard. But yeah, this card's really good. Definitely just an insane card. Next, we have the Mouse. Mouse is very good in this deck. You're usually not playing for the Persona. You're definitely playing for the 50k shield, because this makes it a 20k shield, which is also very important. This deck still buys so much that you almost always have this online. Just overall, just really good card to have. Last but not least, we of course have Perfect Guards, and we do have the Sanctitude. You definitely need to find this, and you definitely need this in your deck, especially with Stride decks coming out very shortly. Definitely want to be finding this pretty ASAP. Next, we have the triggers. I'm running a proxy. This is a proxy. This is a proxy. This is the red over trigger. I keep giving out my OTs to people to play games, and I keep misplacing my over trigger. Basically, both my blue and red one are in decks that people are borrowing from me right now. This is the red over trigger. This is not the mermaid one. I think the red over trigger is really strong in this deck. Some people play the blue one. The blue one's good too for defensive options. I personally prefer red. I think red is super lethal. Red will close out games. I played red in Ballista. Every single time I checked that thing, it was always game over. Even if my opponent checked OT back, they still had to deal with the insane numbers that this deck creates and what Ballista was creating. That extra attack mattered a lot. If I hit it early, the extra attack mattered a lot. Almost always, I prefer red, especially into mirrors, because mirrors most people play blue. If I hit the red OT against them, they're dead. If they hit the blue OT against me, I usually don't care. I can survive. But if they hit red OT, I'm dead. I don't know why people prioritize blue. I see the value of blue, but I get it. But if you check it early, it just does nothing, whereas red will just keep you going, even if it's just to draw some cards. So I like the extra draw. I like the extra thing. But yeah, red OT is where it's at. You can run the lyrical one. I will say this is one of the few decks where it matters the least because the numbers are already stupidly high. You don't need the lyrical one at all in Prism. So yeah, so there's that. But anyway, so yeah, get yourself a red or blue tee. I know they're kind of expensive, but and like I said, I prioritize red, and I'll prioritize red for a while. I just think that one's significantly stronger, but most people will actually disagree with me on that. Next we have heals. I was running vanillas when I played yesterday, but this into mirrors is very important. This is the crit one. This is the one that says if your opponent gained a crit, you get 25k shield. You get 50k shield, which makes it 25. Into Dredjewel, this is very important, which Dredjewel is an insanely strong deck. I think it's actually one of the best decks in the format by far right now. I think that deck is really, really hard to play around. It's very aggressive, it's very lethal, it has 5 attacks, got a lot of numbers, it just does a lot, and it's very strong. It just has a dust turn, and the zero power is very rough, and just in general, I think this comes up. Also, you're gonna be seeing prisms. Like if you're playing Prism, you're gonna see Prism. It's just gonna happen. And if you're going second, this is very important. If you're going first, it matters a little less because you can potentially actually kill them before it matters. But if you can't kill them and you're going second, this will come up a lot more. There's a couple other decks that kind of gain crits that you might want to be kind of cautious of. I will say the restanding one's also pretty good. And I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think Youthberg also gains a crit if I remember correctly. It's been a second since I faced Youthberg, so I don't remember precisely. It also has the restanding, stuff. So the restanding heal is also not too bad. I've actually been thinking about going 2-2, but it's a little risky because I'm basically knocking myself shield in like the regular situations. But if you want to go pure and just run all 4 regular, that's fine too. That's what I was doing prior to today. The usual crits, just 4 crits and then 4 more crits. These do not have to be the Sullen crits, and I actually recommend going vanilla crits. You don't need the Sullen crits at all in this deck. If you're playing optimally, you should never be out of soul. And if you're not playing optimally, well, now time to learn how to play the deck correctly, because this is definitely a deck where your resource management is very important, and you should be constantly cautious of how you're managing your resources. You should not be running out of soul unless you're playing against Prison, but against Prison, your soul should be empty anyway, and you should be finding ways to refill it yourself. Overall, you don't need these at all. I think they're actually completely wasteful in this deck. Especially if they're expensive, you should just be running regular vanilla crits. You should be perfectly fine. Now, going on to effect triggers that you do need, that's definitely the fronts and the draws. Right now running draws because we don't have energy. I might switch over to fronts just because the fronts make it more lethal, especially since you're calling 2 cards out. The fronts will always be utilized once you're on grade 3. I will say prior to grade 3, they won't be as impactful. I'm running the draws because when this deck bricks, it actually really struggles to do much. And I also just like it's surprising enough the 10k shield has been coming up quite a bit. But I will say the fronts are usually more impactful in terms of just finishing games. The 20k shield is so on and so forth. I like the draw. A lot of people are scared of deck out and stuff like that, which is understandable. I haven't had any deck out issues so far with just running the 3 draw, but there is a chance that I might change these to fronts. And also just for you, if you're out there deciding, it is definitely a hard decision. I feel like either or is fine. I do think if you want to close out a game faster, fronts are better, but this deck accumulates such high numbers that the fronts are kind of whatever. The only time the fronts really matter is if you miss Persona. If you miss, I had a game where I literally damaged my Personas, so I just sat there like a vanilla. My numbers were just high enough and I still won the game. However, it took so much more effort to do that because I didn't have Persona. The front's covered for that part, which is also really nice. If you just go double front, like you just put 20k power to the board and you don't even need persona at that point. Also, again, if you're going second into a mirror, the fronts can carry you over because obviously you're turned behind and you don't have persona active. And another fun fact, almost every Prism player will have persona because they have top 7 searches for persona. Missing persona is almost impossible unless you're like me and you happen to damage them. But for the most part, out of all the games I've played, I only have one game where that happened, but every other game I've always had at least one persona in hand because, like I said, this deck searches for it, this deck draws cards, and you just do enough to where you'll usually see 1 to 2 personas every single game. So you have to play into the fact that you know for a fact your opponent will be persona riding against you if they're playing Prism as well. You should know that persona turn is coming and that turn is very lethal and you have to figure out a way to play around it. One way to deal with that is just have fronts, and you know, just checking fronts just really helps. So there's that. So that's basically the deck. That was everything I could show you in the deck. We're gonna do a quick mulligan run just to show you guys how this deck functions. It's a very simple deck, but there's definitely a couple niche situations that you should definitely be on the lookout for. I don't know if we'll see them in the mulligan, but I guess we'll find out. All right, hopefully I've shuffled my deck enough. We're gonna kind of back out a little bit, make some room for us for our little mulligan run. 2 is going first. That's a 1, so I definitely am not choosing. So my opponent is choosing to go first or second. But let's just pretend that they chose to go first. I will say, in this deck particular, you want to go first. At least what I've noticed is usually want to go first. If you don't know what your opponent's playing, you know, you just don't know. I mulliganed back the triggers, kept basically some really good cards here, and we got back some triggers, which is pretty good, and then we're basically just gonna shuffle. Not too bad of a starting hand. We have a Prism card, which is always important for the ride line, so at least for the ride line, we're good to go. I might be dropping that heal here in a sec, we'll have to see. I usually have to drop my triggers when I play this deck, and sometimes it's a little hard. We drew the heal. We're actually gonna drop the heal. We're going second, so chances are whatever deck we're playing the crit might come up. Of course, it's just a matter if the crit comes up or not. Here we're gonna draw. We don't have anything else to do. If you really want to be annoying, you can rush a little bit, do something like this. Specifically want to call this first and then call this in front of it, because by the way, this 5k, it can be active at any point. If you're a little cautious of your opponent trying to, oh yeah, we could have also played this, but it's okay, we'll play it next time. But if you're a little cautious of your opponent swinging into her, of course don't call her out, but I think here we'll just keep it simple, just swing. Check another one, and then we're gonna take a damage. I don't actually want to guard because we have the grade 2 in your hand that will help us find some prisms. We're gonna go ahead and put this on standby right into this. I'm actually gonna go ahead and check top 7 first off of the effect before I go into the Velshbon. Here is of course another prism. There's the persona I was talking about. Remember how I mentioned you're gonna find persona? Yeah, you're gonna find persona. It's almost impossible to not have persona. There's that, and then we'll use the Velshbon ability to go ahead and Soul Blast, Bomb Deck her, and draw a card. So we'll draw that. We'll draw into a mouse. That's pretty good. Next, I am going to go ahead and use the Counterblast here. I do want to find the grade 2 pretty ASAP here, so we're going to go ahead and check top 7. Hope we don't whiff here. That'd be very sad. Oh, look, another persona. That's crazy. We didn't find a grade 2, so hopefully we do find her, because I'm not going to lie, without her, this deck just starts struggling a lot. You can't do 5 attack plays very easily if you don't have the grade 2. That's fine. We'll just go ahead and put that to hand. And here you can decide, like I said, if you want to move this up and swing it with it or not. It just depends on the matchup. If you're really scared your opponent's going to touch your stuff, sometimes it's just best to lead in the back row and swing. We got a crit, cool. Might have hit, might have not. We're going to take 1 damage here. That's not good. And maybe block something else. And they did go first, so chances are we're probably giving up a little bit of shield here. And then now it's back to us. I'm going to draw a Sanctitude, and we're going to probably do this one. It kind of sucks we have to give up so much of the soul here, but we have to do what we got to do. So here we're probably going to activate this ability first, and probably going to call this here. Actually, kind of tough knowing where we want to call what, because we have the grade 1 in our hand too. That would be very good to kind of a little rough, but anyway, we'll just call it here. And then we'll draw a card off of the ride line ability, and then we'll use her ability to Soul Blast, Bomb Deck, and draw again. I'm kind of just really hoping we're going to find that grade 2. Oh my god. We did not find that grade 2, which is really bad for us, by the way. We really need to find the grade 2. But we do have this grade 2, which might save all our problems. So let's go ahead and check top 7 again. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, there she is. 7. There's our girl. There she is. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. So good, we found her. Now, because our board stays a little funky here, since we found the grade 2 kind of late, we're gonna have to think through how we're gonna do this. I think first we're gonna start with a Soul Blast and just go ahead and bounce this back to hand. And we're probably gonna move this up. I think what we're gonna do here, this isn't what I would normally do. Normally what I would do is I would call the 2 here. Oh, and because we bounced this back way, we gotta use this ability. Let's counter charge and soul charge. Cool. Anyway, so normally I would have the grade 2 here, the grade 1 here, the other grade 1 here, kind of go crazy. Another thing we can do is we can do something like this. Something like that. Swing with both sides, bounce them both back, and then use her effect to then call it the 2 and the 1. Kind of up to you how you want to do it. And so yeah, we're gonna have to call over one of these, unfortunately. We're gonna have to do it like that. And now she gets the +5 and +5, so this is +10. This also has a +5. So let's go ahead and do that. And yeah, we'll just have to lose the card. Unfortunate, but it's just what we have to do. So we're gonna swing here. And then she's gonna mandatorily bounce back to hand. And then we're gonna swing here boosted. And then we're gonna use her ability. Soul Blast. Bounce her back, bounce the grade 1 back. We're gonna soul charge, but we can't counter charge anymore. Then we're gonna swing with our Labrador, use the ability, then go ahead and depending on how you want to make numbers, you can do something like this. And then they each get +10. Oh, sorry. One gets +5, one gets +10. You can do something like that. This is 18, and this is 15. Maybe it's probably better if we do it like this. Wait, this is +5. Up to you how you want to do it. We also now, because we're facing a deck that went second, that we're going second into, we actually have a passive +5k buff as well. So basically, this is now 18, and this is now 25, I believe. And then we also have a crit on this, and we also draw a card. So we're gonna draw a card, and now we're gonna go check 1, check 2, and there's our prism units. There they are. And then we're gonna swing with this, and we're gonna swing with this, and we're gonna soul blast for her ability once more. Bounce back both of these to hand, and I would recommend soul charging 1 here. We soul charge 1 normally. That's crazy. And then pass it back to our opponent. They're probably gonna beat our skull in. We do have a very massive hand, so we can handle it, but we are gonna get our skull beaten quite a bit. I think here we're probably gonna use the mouse at some point. So we're gonna use the mouse here to remove 2 of our ride deck cards. So we'll just remove these 2 to get that extra 20k shield. Definitely gonna be taking some damage. We're probably actually gonna go straight to 5. We're gonna draw cards to give ourselves some power, and we're gonna get some more power. Cool. So we're at 33. We're at 33k base right now. Definitely makes a lot of these, whatever our opponent's doing, it's gonna make it a lot easier to block. Gonna go ahead and still drop some shield because we're probably gonna need to, especially if we're facing decks like Jeweled. Even with that in mind, we'll probably still be dropping a PG somewhere to deal with some of the numbers. So we're gonna drop a PG and actually drop one of these probably for it, and then pass it back to us. So let's go ahead and start our turn. We're gonna draw, and we're gonna Persona Ride. We're gonna draw again. Now we're under the 10k Persona turn, which is also really good here. We have a lot of setup. We're definitely really cooking here. And a lot of good stuff. You can set up in multiple ways here. I think the easiest thing is we're just gonna keep it simple. We're gonna go ahead and call the call this. Use the ability of Labrador, which by the way I forgot about the 5k the Labrador had. I always do. Bounce this back, soul charge 1, and counter charge 1, which is also very important for us. You can also double Velshbon here. We don't have the order, so actually double Velshbon in. But double Velshbon. Actually, we'll just keep this in here. Double Velshbon isn't too bad. We'll just do 1 just for the sake of it. And then here we're actually gonna have to call over this anyway, call the Ura. And then yeah, basically we're just gonna set up for this. We could counterblast here and dig for another prism card. I think we are gonna do that, so let's see if we find one. I doubt it because we actually have seen quite a bit of them. Yeah, we whiffed. I figured we were gonna whiff, so we're actually gonna soul charge 2, and hopefully the soul charge 2 doesn't soul charge us a bunch of triggers because we actually haven't seen that many. There's 1, there's 2. Those are not triggers. So sweet. Let's go ahead and fill up our soul. Our soul's looking very healthy, which is very good for us. And then, yeah, I think here we're just going to call the 2, call the 1. We're basically going to repeat the process of what we did last time. Also, there's a 5k on her. And, yeah, basically we're going to swing in. This is 18, 23, 33, 38 at the Vanguard. Then we're going to bounce this back. We're going to swing in this way. This side is 18, 28, 38, 43. And then we're going to use her ability to bounce back both of these. And then we don't need to soul charge, so we're probably not going to soul charge on this one. We might soul charge on the last one. Then we're going to swing here, activate the ability, counterblast 1, call them back out. This gets +10, this gets +5. So now this is 18, 20, 33, and this is 20, 30, 35, which are they're both perfect numbers to play around the mouse and also force your opponent to have to guard. And then we also draw a card off of the Labrador, and then we're going to do 2 tries. Check 1, you could put wherever you think would be better for you. Check 2. And then if this hits, let's pretend it does, we have to search your deck for an order. So we're obviously going to grab the only order we can grab, which is this one. Because we already have the Sank, and we just drew the Regalia space. So there's that. And we're going to again swing here, and then use the ability of our girl. Soul Blast, bounce both these back, and we're good to go. Now, something's interesting here. Our hand is extremely massive. there's a very low chance we're gonna die. And the reason being is we have this active, so we can actually go ahead and use this here because we have the soul for it. We have Persona coming too, so we should be fine there. But we actually have enough to live, so we can safeguard something, probably use this as a 10k. Drop these because we don't need these cards anymore. We may want to keep one depending on situations, but we should be okay. And then we could drop again, probably even drop one of these, and we should be able to live another turn. So that was a lot of cards we dropped, but we should be able to live. We were going to heal anyway, so we were going to live regardless. But we're going to go ahead Persona, draw a card, draw our girl again. This time we're going to go ahead and call this card. Definitely going to use the ability of her to bounce her back to then soul charge 1 and counter charge, which is very important here. We do need the counter charge. And then we're going to go ahead and play the order for the counter blast for the additional 5k. And then here we're just going to go in. Now keep in mind this card can't work here because we don't have all the counter blast for it. So instead we're just going to set up basically. And I think here we're just going to call this out because this is definitely our last turn. So we're going to go ahead and swing this way. And we're on Persona again, by the way. We're going to go ahead and swing this way. We have the additional 5k. So this is 13, 23, 33, 38. And then we're going to swing on this side for 18, 28, 38, 48. And then use her ability to go ahead and bounce back these two. And then you can choose to soul charge 1 here. And then again, we're going to go ahead and swing with her. We'll get the additional 5k here once we counter blast. And then also her additional 5k, and basically call these back out again. And then we're going to draw one singular card, and then we're going to go drive check 1, draw, put power wherever you want to put it, but it drew to a draw. And drive check 2 is a crit, put the crit power wherever you want to put it. And then you're going to go ahead and swing with the grade 1, swing with the grade 2, soul blast, bounce these both back, and that should be game. In off situations, when things are going wrong, keep in mind you can also call out her, and call out her. And when you were to be soul blasting, if you can also swing, and then use her ability to soul blast and bounce back both of these. So something to keep in mind, you can do something like that only in life or death situations that you want to be calling this one out. You definitely want to be prioritizing the grade 1. But I've definitely had a game where I had to call this out, but luckily enough, the grade 2 can still bounce her back. So that's something else to keep in mind. Sometimes, like I said, you'll be in weird situations where you're just gonna have a board with these grade 2s, so like kind of what we had, and then we did have the situation. So you can have something like this happen basically. If you have the prism cards in hand, like pretending you do have the prism cards in hand, you can basically do something like this. Let's give ourselves some soul. But what you can do is you can basically swing with like that, and then bounce both of these to hand, and then swing with the Labrador ability, use her effect, and then call out this and this, and then you can do your drive checks and whatever else. So you can do this as well, and then soul blast, get back these back to hand. So there's something else you can keep in mind. You can do that if you already have a board. You just don't want to mess up the board. There's something else you can do. You can also play for both grade 2s on the board. Because you can set up this way, they each get the 5. Swing this way, then you can soul blast, bounce both back, do the character soul charge, and then you can swing this way, and again soul blast, bounce back both. Then you can swing with Vanguard, use the ability, and then either call like this, depending on the situation, or call like this, depending on the situation. But then you can go like this, and then do your drive checks, and then again swing with this, soul blast, and bounce back both. Now you notice because you did that, you kept the board absolutely empty. Because the downside to this card is that she stays on the board. So if you're in a situation where you really don't want your opponent touching your board, and you do have double copies of both of these, you can play it like that as well. You can also, if you really want to play for the denial, another thing you can do is you can set up these. Don't call anything in the back row. Swing with both of these, and then swing with her. And these are obviously in your hand, and then you can call something like this, and then again, do this, do that, and then soul blast, and bounce this back to hand, and this will also give you an empty board. Obviously, if you keep cards out like this in the board, this hits, even if you don't have an order in there, sometimes it'd be good to just retire her anyway, just to get her off the board in case you are scared of like dominating. So I hope that was informative. I definitely try to give as many like lines of plays as I can think of. The only thing I didn't talk about was like early on, you can actually call cards out and kind of rush your opponent. I do rush into mirrors. I tend to rush because I want to be able to close out the game on grade 3 red. And actually against a Leonard player, it's exactly what I did. I rushed them down, and they died on my grade 3 turn, even without Persona and without any like special magical numbers. I just kind of killed them off of just the pure raw power that the cards have on their own. And it was enough to basically kill, because I'm not gonna lie, some of the cards attack like as if they're on Persona turns. So yeah, so something to kind of keep in mind. That's just some playstyle stuff. Just be careful of how you're rushing down, because like I said, if your opponent starts attacking your rear guards, you have to be able to guard them. I've actually been, there are times where I was just straight PGing some of my rear guards, like the Leonard player swung into one of my rears. I only had the PG and I just PG'd it just to keep it alive. And also sometimes you don't want to take too much damage, and sometimes you can actually bait people by calling out the 2. So people will usually see the Prism card. Like basically if you call this card out and people see it on the board, they're going to want to swing into it because they know you need it. And if that's what you want them to do, then, and you have the guard for it, then have them do it, you know, let them swing into it, because you're going to still guard for it, but you're not taking damage, if that makes sense. So if you want to stay at a very specific interval of damage, you can just call her out and force them to want to swing into it, guard her, and then you have basically access to work with 1 damage because this deck can counter charge, and then you can kind of play into game plan. Now this is kind of like a little bit more of like a higher level play move, and it's definitely something that you need to decide depending on the matchup you're playing into. When I was facing against Leonard, I knew I could guard. I had this card on the board. I knew I could guard it. And like I said, I was kind of almost baiting my opponent to swing into it. Because what happened is that they did swing into it. I guarded it, and then I rolled for 3 and killed it. And I was at lower damage and I have to worry about too much stuff, and I felt in a very safe zone in case they did live and they went into the Leonard turn and started playing their game. If they made it that far, I had a lot of room to take damage, and also she stayed safe because I'm going to bounce her back on the Labrador anyway. I did lose a PG for it, but I also had room to take more damage, so it's kind of like I said, it was a high-end play, because early on you kind of want to guard anyway, because you don't want to be at like 5 damage when your opponent's swinging for like 40k at you, right? So you usually want to guard anyway, but having to avoid taking damage at all and forcing them to swing to rear guard was also just really safe and really awesome. But yeah, just some little things you can do. It's really hard sometimes to guard early, especially if you're committing a board. But again, this is more high level play, more stuff that usually is decided between like a good player and a great player when they play decks like these, like just knowing the meta, knowing how your deck functions versus someone else's deck functions. Like I said, it's a little bit more of a high level discussion. It's not just like the deck, it's just like how to play the deck properly into a certain matchup. There's something to kind of keep in mind. I thought I'd give you guys just a small discussion on that too, and how to bait people into doing stuff that you want them to do. And that's definitely one way to bait people. But anyway, this has been a really long video. I don't know if it's actually going to stay this long when I edit it. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Stay awesome, stay great. Hope this is informative. If it was, do not forget to like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. I think this is a pretty informative video for those of you guys out there that really need something to start out with, or a competitive edge to start out with. I think this is definitely one of the videos to start out with for D specifically. So I hope this helps you and everything that you're trying to do. So yeah. Peace out, guys. That's been Danny. See you guys in a future video. Bye!